Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Beneath the Transaction podcast. I'm your host, Chris Pineda, and have a very exciting episode today and an amazing guest. And I'm going to introduce Brian here in a second, but I always like to give a brief spiel to anybody who's listening for the first time. For many years, this podcast was actually called the Rooted Leadership Podcast, and it was connected to our Leadership Institute. And we were talking about anything under the sun leadership. Well, through our work in this institute, we gathered a lot of research and emerged these 7 conditions of transformation because we were so intrigued by this idea of transformation, how to make it happen, right? It turns out you can't force it. You can't make it happen. You can't teach it. And that's the importance of the conditions, are to invite transformation into your life, whether that's individually or professionally or even in a community. So my book coming out is also called Beneath the Transaction, and it's discovering the 7 conditions of transformation in life and leadership. So I've reached out to a lot of my network of people that I've known, and then I've kind of done the cold call approach to people on LinkedIn, and that's how I actually met Brian. He showed up as, here's a recommended connection. And I shot him a message and said, hey, I like your background. I think you have something to say around what it takes to move beneath the transaction and create, real transformational type of change. And so I reached out and we hopped on a call and had a great conversation. Lots of those calls are good enough. They could have been recorded themselves, but here we are. And I'm excited to have the conversation today. So this is Brian. Brian is the Chief Growth Officer at Columbia Southern University, and obviously a rich background in academics. And I've been interviewing people in corporate, philanthropy, academics, even people, talking simply about life itself, nothing necessarily professional or organizational about it, because it's this scope of transformation. But you are, I think, our first that's specifically in the world of academics, actually, from my recent episodes we've been recording. So I'm excited to dive into this because I'm passionate about higher education. So I'm going to stop talking now, Brian, and let you introduce yourself more thoroughly. Tell listeners who you are and some of your background, and then we'll jump in.
All right. Well, salamat, Chris. That means thank you in Tagalog.
Yes.
So my name is Brian Belliveau. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Columbia Southern University. In my role, my responsibility is to help create strategies, policies, procedures to really help the university grow. What I found, Chris, that's really kind of exciting about what you're talking about, this transformation, is in order to get to that growth, in order to get things implemented, in order for things to get moving, it takes people, right? So at the end of the day, it's important to understand the impact that it's going to have on the team and the best way to kind of get that buy-in, right? The excitement about making these changes, implementing these processes. And I geek out about the processes, but they're not going to, right? So how do I get them excited about it? And I'm actually a Navy veteran. As a veteran, I saw varied ways of approaching that, So in the military, there's that very top-down style, that didn't necessarily speak to me, and so there was other ways that, I tried to approach it and learn from styles in the outside world, outside of the military, right? In the corporate world, tried to learn about implementation in creating that buy-in. What I could tell you, what brought me to Columbia Southern, I'd like to mention this real quick, was I secret shopped a school, and, working for several schools, one of the things that Columbia Southern has above every other institution is that they're just so warm. And so when I called in, they were that Southern charm, the Southern hospitality. Oh yeah, it was amazing. And they kept saying, "Bless your heart." So I was like, I have to be saying something right. But, it was good people and just really had a good story behind it. As an institution, they really focused on making sure they're delivering a quality product at an affordable price. And most institutions will say they're affordable. CSU really means it. They focus on that affordability to make it really, matter for the students. And I just love that. It just drives me and gets me excited.
And before that was it Colorado where you were before?
Yeah, I was at Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. Yeah, it was a art school, which was fun. You got to meet all these unique students with all these different talents. And I could honestly say every single time I saw a student's portfolio that their work was way more amazing than anything I could do, because I am a horrible artist. So I was just blown away by everything they did. So it was really cool to be a part of that community and get to see all of that. And again, I was working in the same capacity of heading up an admissions group. So,
Okay.
It was a lot of fun.
No, I appreciate the intro, and we've already found a couple things in common. You mentioned the beginning, you said salamat, and I'm half Filipino. Your wife is Filipina, so that's a fun connection. Before we started recording, we were chatting it up about all the amazing Filipino food out there. So
It's dangerous. Just
it
got to
is.
warn you.
It is dangerous, man. It's so good. And then, I remember you talking about the art school, but I don't recall if I told you I was an artist. I really
Oh,
enjoy
wow.
art. I've been a painter and I love to draw, just, sketch as well. We used to sell some of my art. My stuff is very realistic. I love portraiture.
And I think a lot of art to me is really, it depends on perspective. And to your point, selling it, right? That perspective
Mhm.
and then selling it. And that was something they did teach at that school. So it wasn't just learning the techniques and the theory behind why you were painting it or drawing it or, doing whatever you're doing. Like there's a law of threes, how to
Mhm.
get the right proportionality, so it went beyond that as well into some of the business side. So I really enjoyed that school. And when I joined, that school was actually losing money. It was a school that
Really?
wasn't really making
Wow.
it, and so my mentor brought me on. He was somebody I'd worked with in the past, and he said, "Hey, I'd like you to come work with me." Within 2 years, we turned that institution around to being profitable,
That's
and
amazing.
so, yeah, it was just a lot of fun. I loved it.
Well, I think that one of the reasons that probably contributed to that, and I know something that we wanted to dive into today as we, spoke offline, which has been several weeks now ago, but was one of the conditions of transformation. And I want to tee you up with a question, and it's the first one, it's purpose, but I'm gonna tee it up a little bit by segueing with an art analogy and then some of our research where we discovered that, and I say discovered not because we were the first to realize purpose is so important in transformation. Most people know that, but there's something powerful when you conduct research and you gather data, and then this data set is telling you clearly that this is important, and then how it's so important. How do you integrate purpose in terms of a process and a procedure into a change effort? That was where the power came from. Everybody, I think, could agree that purpose is something important to creating any sort of change at all, let alone transformational change. So I want to get to that, but I'm going to tee it up first. Is that all right?
That's good.
First thing just kind of popped to mind as we're talking about art is, growing up as an artist, trying to be an artist, I had a gift for it that teachers pointed out. And I had specifically a teacher in high school that was like, Chris, you have a gift here. You need to use it. And I more enjoyed it. I loved looking at the outcome. I rushed my art often and I just loved the outcome. That was it. And I selfishly, I kind of liked the way people would respond to the art, right? And I was also an athlete, and I was more passionate about the sports I was involved in. My teacher was always like, Chris, you should quit soccer and quit this and just focus on art. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And I thought I was going to be an art major in college. And then I realized I wasn't. And it was because it didn't connect with my personal why as much as I thought it would. But I also would say it's because I didn't understand why I was doing art. I remember moments, and I didn't appreciate this until years later, but I'd be working on this piece and I'd be doing this face. And, realistic painting or drawing takes a lot of time and there's a lot of shading and lighting and getting things just right. And I remember in high school, I always struggled with lips. Like I loved doing the eyes and the noses and all these things, but making lips come to life for me was hard. But I figured it out. But I remember one time I was working on this face, big face, on a big piece of art paper, and it must have been I don't know, 20 by something. It was big. And the lips were in there because I was making shape. I was already to the point where I'm shading and erasing, and I'm like trying to do fine detail. And I bring it up to her to just get some advice. And she takes out this huge eraser and just erases like the lips, the nose, half the chin. And I'm like,
Wow.
when she's doing it, I'm like, my heart dropped like, oh, that was hours of work. And she just erased it right in front of me. And then she's like, I think you should start over, Chris. And I'm like, well, now I have to. Her name was Miss
Right.
Coletti. Her name was Miss Coletti. Now I have to, Miss Coletti. You just erased it. And she's like, I just need you to think about why you're doing this piece. Because it was a 3-set piece of my 3 sisters. I have a brother and 3 older sisters, and I had this 3-set pieces of portraits of my sisters. And she asked me, she's like, why are you doing this piece? Why are you doing these images of your sister? I did not have a good answer. And I never came up with a good answer. It was all very technical to me. Like, I think I just need to do shading here a little bit better and this and that, you know? And so I ignored this lesson she was trying to teach me. Years later, now I look back and she was trying to help me understand, you know, who I was as an artist. And I didn't actually get it. I went to college. I tried art. I was really bored by it. It's long classes. And I was like, this is not what I want to do forever. So I actually stopped then. I started studying something else. And it wasn't until later that I understood that a big part of my purpose was being an influence for good and helping create transformation and bring people together. And it took me years after that to when I was sort of commissioned to do art, and it was religious art. From somebody found out I was an artist and they said, Chris, could you do this piece? You know, and it needs to look like this and it needs to mean this thing. And it was a Christian piece of art of the Savior and whatnot. That all of a sudden, I found myself engulfed in why I wanted to do this. And it was because I wanted to help inspire and bring people together through this image. And ever since then, I've done art consistently, but only really as gifts and by ask. And they're typically all religious pieces. So that's kind of a long story about how, just segueing in with art, where, you know, as an artist, I had all the technical things down. And this gets into, I think, leadership too, because there's all these tangible, transactional, technical things, how you shade, how you erase, how you hold a pencil or a paintbrush here, and all these different things, and the layers and this and that. I get all that, and I knew all of that, but I was missing why I wanted to do it, and that was key for me. And I saw the same thing in our Leadership Institute. When we first started doing this work, we were throwing a lot of money and resources at all these technical things, and nothing was really working. We were focused on great stuff like, hey, we need to build relationships, which is another condition, but we had just skipped that. Like, let's just help people build strong relationships and blah, 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 blah. And it was just fleeting. You know, they would have these great moments and then it wouldn't last. And it took 3 years or more for us to finally realize we're not giving enough focus to purpose. Like, we've written one down for ourselves. We certainly don't talk about it enough, and we're not making process and making decisions around it. And then we're not integrating it in all these different ways. And it wasn't until we started doing that things started to unfold for us. So there's my tee up for this question, which is, what does it mean to create a purpose-driven team or organization that isn't just writing it down on a wall and in a handbook and talking about it at team meetings or kickoffs? What does it mean to create a purpose-driven organization? How have you found a way or ways of doing that actually moves beneath the surface and really starts to change people here, right? Is that an okay question?
Yeah, it's a good question.
That was a long backstory to get to that question, but I feel like you're going to pull things from that and answer this. So take it away.
Before I jump into the question, there was a piece there that you talked about that early on in my career I had to learn. It was that feedback is a gift. Your teacher came up and gave you a gift when she erased that and started asking you questions, because that was feedback.
And I didn't take it.
Right. Well, it's just an opportunity to learn, right? You have an opportunity to take that information and do something with it. And so, you know, I always try and, when I'm receiving feedback, take it that way. It's like, this is an opportunity to really give me a true look at something that I can improve, something that I can do better, and in a way to just be the person that I want to be. And when you talk about purpose, so to kind of give you a high level understanding of why purpose is so important within our organization and really within the industry, is that it's a highly regulated industry. And so I'm not allowed to reward people financially based on their performance. And there's a lot of regulations that stem around how we interact with our students. And because of that, a lot of the times when we're introducing topics and we're introducing things like a vision, the vision that I'm putting out there for our team is that we're there to change our students' lives. We're there to impact them in a way to where they don't even fully know or have thought through why they need to make this decision, and why it's going to change their life, why it's going to impact them. Part of the training we do is to have them talk to students and ask them questions about, why are you getting this degree? How's it going to change your life? And if you didn't get your degree, what was your life like? Doing that allows them to think through it at a level that they won't do on their own. They're too busy, taking care of the kids. They're making dinner, right? They don't think about these things. They just know, I got to go get this college education. That's all they're thinking. And so to give them that gift of digging down deeper, it really puts it into perspective of how important this life-changing decision can be. I kind of got that concept. There was something Steve Jobs said where he put out his vision. He says, I want to put a ding in the universe. It's like, who doesn't get up and get motivated by that? You might not get motivated by like a cell phone or whatever other Apple product,
Yeah.
but you hear, I want to put in a ding in the universe. You're like,
Yeah.
wow, let's go, right? I'm
Yeah.
ready to run through a wall. So I think there's a component of, having a compelling statement or a mission that's going to speak to people. Personal purpose for me has always been to help people. So I served in the Navy as a hospital corpsman. I was there to help people, I was in the medical field. I was there to serve the other service members. And when I got out, I fell into this education field. I actually was going to classes, and a financial aid advisor sat next to me and said, you're really funny. You know what you'd be good at? And I said, oh, stand-up comedy? She goes, you're not that funny. She's like, you'd be good in admissions. And that's how I ended up getting into the job.
Okay.
And it's a job of helping people. We're on the phone, we're walking them through things that they are not thinking of on their own, and we're helping them arrive at a decision that they wouldn't take on their own. And it's getting them through that process. The other aspect that I like to do is I call it, when I'm releasing information or putting out a policy, I talk about the WIFM, and WIIFM. What's in it for me is what that stands for. And I got to think from the perspective of my team member, what's in it for them? Right. And so how can I present this in a way that's going to get them excited about this message? If it's impacting the student in a good way, I need to talk about that. Or if it's impacting their job on a day-to-day basis, I need to talk about that. This is an exciting change. This is why. Part of that is to hopefully create that ownership mentality in that change. How am I owning not just me, but my other leaders? How are we owning this message?
Yeah.
How are we making it ours? This change is a positive thing. This is why I own it. I'm not relying on somebody else to be making those decisions necessarily.
So with WIFM, a question around that. How do you break through the barrier, the surface of, because there's a lot of ways to answer when you're thinking about what's in it for, what does it stand for?
What's in it for me is what it stands for, but it's, you're thinking from their perspective. Yeah.
There's lots of things that I would say could be very transactional. Like, well, I want this degree, or I want to make this amount of money, or I want X, Y, and Z, that are all sort of accomplishment based, which are great. I'm not saying that those things are bad at all. They're good things. But where I've found sort of purpose really sits is less about accomplishment and more about becoming, and I found too, and I talk about this a lot, is, too often we set accomplishment goals, doing goals, and we do everything possible to accomplish those, but then we're not always happy with who we become as a result. Versus if we start with becoming, I want to become the sort of person like this. I want to become this sort of man or this sort of father, again, speaking from my perspective, then the things that I now do and accomplish in that pursuit are worthy of what I want to become. So how have you found, as you imagine that with your exercise or your staff or your team, the questions that follow with the WIFM analogy that get past okay, this person just wants this sort of degree in this, like this is what they really want to become, and this is deeper to them. Am I making sense? How do you make that analogy to getting deeper than just the transactional wants or accomplishments?
Yeah, when I was talking to students, you were talking about things like money as an example, right? Is it something they're trying to accomplish? If that was something that they're telling me that's kind of driving them for this goal. It's the thing that I realized was that people don't just want money. They want money to do something with it. And so I need to figure out what that is. They're not Scrooge McDuck swimming through all the money, right? It's like, what are you going to do with this? How is this going to impact your life? There were stories I had where, there was a single mom who was sleeping on their friend's couch and their kids were sharing rooms with their friend's kids. And it allowed her to get a place of her own. So her kids have their own room. That is way more depth than I want money. And so that was where I went with it. And even titles, sometimes you get somebody, I want, well, why do you want the title? How's that going to impact you? It's asking that, I call it layering. It's asking those next questions, right? What goes beyond that? What's the next question? And even with my staff, right? When I was directly managing people, I would be with them and ask them, okay, so you want this promotion. What is it going to do for you? What do you plan on doing with that, right? What does it mean to you? Why do you want it? Getting more information so that you're able to really see how it's impacting them as a person and what it means to their life. Because it's not just about the title. It's not just, I'm this title, right? Now I feel this. Usually there's something deeper there and you can really get to it.
Yeah, you're reminding gonna look something up because you're reminding me of in our institute, we used to watch this video. It's a silly video, but I think that the meaning behind it is so good. Let me Google it really quick.
Of course.
I wanna find this, we'll watch it together because I think it will add to what you're saying and how important this is to unpacking purpose and then turning it into process that actually create purpose-driven organizations. It's not enough to just set the purpose. We have to dig.
Well, I always like to use the Shrek video where, the ogres are like onions, they have layers.
Yes, that's a great analogy too. Okay, so here's this video. You may have seen this. It's from the TV show, I think called Lucky Louie.
Okay. Looking forward to it. You're amping it up pretty good.
It's definitely it's a humorous clip. A little bit blurry, but old.
Papa, can you play outside?
No,
Why?
because it's 5 o'clock in the morning. It's too early.
Why?
The sun hasn't come up yet.
Why?
Because the sun comes up later.
Why?
Well, the Earth goes around, and when it turns a certain amount, the sun shows on the horizon.
Why?
I don't know.
Why? Why don't you know, Papa?
Because I didn't pay attention in school, okay? I didn't listen in class.
Why?
Because I was high all the time. I smoked too much pot.
Why?
I didn't think it would matter.
Why?
I just figured my life would come together on its own. But then I met your mom, and you came along. So now I work at the muffler shop.
Why?
Well, it's too late for me to pursue a career now, and since your mom has a job with benefits, I stay home and I take care of you, because what I make is pretty much just a joke.
Why?
Well, the service economy replaced manufacturing.
We can stop now, but I love the video because it's the continuous questioning of why. Now, this can apply in a lot of different contexts, getting to the core of problems, what have you, but I think it certainly applies in understanding purpose. And I think a lot of people haven't asked themselves why enough to get to the reason why they chose the things they chose or why they did the things that they did. Much like my art teacher was trying to get me to think about, and I wasn't willing to do it because it's a little uncomfortable, and he gets a little uncomfortable, like, come on. And then there's this moment where he really opens up and there's something meaningful that he says. And that's kind of like this moment in a sitcom where, okay, now we're getting somewhere real. And that's what I thought of when you mentioned Whiffam.
Yeah.
Whiffam is,
With them.
yeah, it's more than just, oh, I want this job or make this money or live in this place. There's something deeper that's there. We have that as individuals and organizations have that. Like, what would it be like if we questioned, why do we believe in this? Like what you said about your university. Why do we want to be so affordable? Why? And why does that matter? You keep asking and asking. And all of a sudden you uncover this really, usually pretty deep purpose. And then it resonates at a different level than we want to be an affordable university. Okay, well, that might mean something to some people, but if you keep asking, I'm sure there's a really profound why there.
Absolutely. And I think, too, just as you're working through things like change management, it's understanding why are we making this change, right? So it's the why behind that. Why are in the other aspect, too, to your point, I always like to ask when I'm joining a school is why are we doing it this way? What is the purpose behind that? Understanding there may be a reason that I'm not seeing, or there may be a reason that it makes sense to do it a certain way, but there might not be. And should we make a change? How would it impact the student? And so I think part of it for me is understanding that why at not just the institutional level, but understanding the why at the process level, understanding the person's why.
Hmm.
If we can get into all of those, I think we're starting to win within the organization.
Yeah. I want to get into the process side because I think that's the most practical piece for people, but I don't want to breeze over this deeper element of the importance of purpose, that there has to be a certain level of depth, that you can't just write in a mission statement and in an employee handbook and say, all right, we've covered purpose. Like it really has to get much further than that. And then we build process around it. So I want to get to the idea of process, but I want to go back to this art analogy. Totally unplanned. I had no idea I was going to be talking about art with you, but as you were talking, I pulled up a couple of my pieces, and I want to share an example of how it changed for me, because when I was younger and I was doing art, my skills weren't as good, I guess, but they're good skills. I could draw a person's face, and it was fairly proportioned out, and the shading was all right, and they looked realistic. But you would look at these photos and you would look at these pictures, and I would always go off a photograph, like I would take a picture of, like, one of those ones with my sister. I took a picture of them and then I drew it. But there was no purpose behind it. I just wanted to draw these pictures that looked nice. I didn't ask enough questions. That's changed for me now when I do a piece. And I want to show you two pieces. Actually, three. I'll show you three. And I'm going to show these to you. And I have no idea if you're religious or not. Are you a very religious
Yes,
person?
yeah,
Christian?
religious
Okay.
person.
So these are all Christian pieces, and I want to show them to you and get your feeling first when you see them. And I want to see if the people that kind of commissioned me to do them, after they told me why it was so important to them and what they wanted out of it, if I did it or not just for them. I know I did it for them because they were so happy with it, but if you can feel it. So I'm going to show you one here. This is not a portrait. This is just of hands.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay. What sticks out to you with that one?
It's the, interestingly enough, my grandfather was actually a carpenter. So, you see that and it just reminds me, it reminds me of being around him and being around that
Yes.
activity and just the amount of pride that he took in his work and making sure it was done right. It was done well, and just the care that went into it. And so it strikes a chord with me in that way. And it might be different than the person you
Yeah.
commissioned it for, but it's personally
I like
from my
that.
background.
Why do you think I did this piece? You don't have to get it right.
Yeah.
No pressure to get it right. I just want to.
Oh, no, I was assuming it had to do with Jesus as the carpenter, right? So
Yeah.
Jesus, that was his upbringing as a carpenter. And so that's what it struck me as, probably related to that.
Yeah. So my the friend I did this for, he is a carpenter, loves woodworking, and never asked me to do a piece of like this though. What the conversation that we had that led to this was, he, knowing that he loves carpentry, but he also is a very devout Catholic man. He loves the Savior, and he believes that and he's a philanthropist. He believes that his checkbook is God's checkbook. He believes that he has to be the hands of the Lord, right? That's kind of his deepest why. And so when I did a piece for him, I tried to capture that, right? That we are his hands, right? And we do his work. And I love what you said about what did you say, your grandpa?
Yeah, it's my grandfather.
Yeah. The attention to detail, and you can tell something handmade from something not, because nothing's ever perfect. There's always little blemishes, and that's part of being his hands as well. As we're not going to do it perfectly, but we're going to do it. And so that was the meaning behind this one. So let me share another one with you I'm going to share two more. One's from I did for a friend. These last two are pictures of the Savior, which is very hard to do, by the way, because everybody has a different idea of him. I've ended up making different versions because I want to talk to the person. Like, tell me about how you think about him. So this was for a friend, and I won't tell you kind of the key elements about the Savior that were important to him, but I just want you to look at this and tell me what you think.
Wow, that's amazing. Just I get this, just the way that look, it just is so intense to me. He's looking off like as if he's watching over something, right? It's this
Right.
watchful eye, and just very intently, and there's an intensity to it, but a calmness at the same time. That's insane how you captured that piece in that look and that vision that he has. At least that's what I'm gathering from the image, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but
No, that's really, really, really close. My friend that wanted this, he didn't want this idea of shepherd too that you're talking about was important to him, but he didn't want a picture of some beautiful, perfect looking man.
Yeah.
He really resonated with those scriptures around a man of sorrow, acquainted with grief. And so I tried to capture this sort of working man that is looking on, that doesn't want attention. He's trying to direct us somewhere else. And you captured that with, he's looking at something. What's he looking at? He's trying to direct us to our neighbor, right? And taking care of the flock, kind of a thing. So that was another. Here's the last one. And this one was for my wife. And this one kind of had a funny origin story, because she's like, you've done all this art for all these other people. You've never done one for me. So I'm like, okay.
Busted.
Okay, what do you want? So she told me what was important to her about the Savior in her mind. And so I tried to capture that with this one.
Gosh. Yeah, there's just so much compassion in that image. Like you could feel it, the amount of compassion that's there. That's amazing.
What sticks out to you?
The eyes are so soft, even though there's this darkness around it, right? The eyes are so soft. It's not I don't know, it sounds weird, but you can feel different emotions through the eyes. I feel like in that there's a softness to that, where the gaze is soft, it's compassionate, it's caring, versus that the other one it felt more intense, honestly.
Yeah. And her image of the Savior is soft and comforting, and the eyes were so important to her, that the eyes would be what people are drawn to with that. So again, sharing this, because we started with this art analogy, but to the difference for me as an artist came down to not technical pieces. It came down to, do I really understand the why behind this? And once I understood that, all the other process or procedure or whatever of how I went into doing the piece fell into place, where I used to get held up on that. I used to get held up on, is this the right angle? Is this, and it would just consume me, where these happen so freely because I understood the why behind it. So translating that now to what we've been talking about with leadership and organizational space, once we capture this why and it resonates and we understand it, we've asked why enough, we've dug deep enough.
Right.
How do we create process and structure that reinforce that and not overpower it, but reinforce it?
For me, what I've seen that's very effective is always making sure, as you're going through any of the processes, is that you're asking the higher purpose. The question I like to ask is, because we are an educational institution, it's, how does this benefit the student? How is this benefiting the student? Why are we doing this for the student? Or why are we doing this as an institution? Some things can be compliance. So it's like, well, we have to do this, otherwise there's no school, right? And so the students couldn't go anywhere. So, okay, that makes sense. So it's understanding that question of, why are we doing this for the student? Or the second way I ask is, why are we doing this for our team members? Because at the end of the day, we're also serving them. We're serving our students, but we're serving our team members as well.
Yeah.
And making the process simpler for them if we can, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's such a simplicity in being purpose-driven is being driven by asking why. Purpose-driven causes us to be curious. It's one thing to set the standard, the vision that we're trying to accomplish. It's one thing to set the purpose, in an organization or our life or a piece of art or a project. It's the majority of the work, I would say, is creating the process and going to doing the work where we're constantly asking, is this honoring that vision? Is this in alignment with that? And we start making decisions based on it. And it took me a long time, getting into leadership to realize that decision making is a skill set, and it's something that you need to have as a leader. And I've just found great comfort and guidance in leaning into purpose first. When purpose is clear, what decision you need to make. When I was in healthcare and running a couple of facilities, and once we did the work of setting vision and purpose, when we knew that, then all of a sudden what comes across my desk, it's can quickly translate with, okay, this isn't my decision to make. This is actually the person talking to me, or this might be somebody else's decision. So that gets out of the way quickly. A lot of leaders get held up with that. They feel like they need to make the decision. And it's like, well, no, this isn't my decision to make. And then another layer of, what's the urgency here? If this is mission critical and this is going to change our vision or why, then I need to stop all things and focus on this now. If it's not, then, we can wait. And so it started to give me this filter of, even in how I prioritize decisions and then how I made those and how our team made them together. That's, I think, some of the simplicity of being purpose driven is just setting in place, whether it's the start of a meeting, the start of your personal sort of, alone time where you're reflecting as a leader, you're planning, to embed questions that you consistently ask yourself, do it as, like I said, as teams where we're always plugging in. Are we staying in alignment with this? And I've had great mentors that taught me this, where, one time I was working on this project when I first started working with this philanthropist, had all these community leaders that were gonna come to this gathering, this training we were going to do. Everything started to fall apart, and I was getting caught up in all the logistics and the image of things and how, and I guess you could say my boss, this philanthropist, he had to remind me, in a late night phone call, he had to remind me, why are we doing all of this, Chris? And I'm like, that's the right question, huh? And he's like, look, we're doing this because we care about X, Y, and Z. And he listed off the deepest reasons of why we do it. And he said, if we're still online with that, then we're okay. And I'm okay investing money into it,
Yeah.
if we're still in line with those things. Turns out we were still in line and we kept moving forward and everything worked out. But there was plenty moments in that moment, and I could tell you dozens of others where I get so caught up in all the transactional, technical things like I did with art that I forget why we're doing it. And that simplifies things tenfold when we understand purpose, when we understand why.
Tremendous, the things that you were talking about there, because you hit on like 5 different categories to me of what you teach, right? So that decision making as a practice or as a skill, that means that you're going to be wrong. And having the comfortability or that safe space, vulnerability, whichever one you want to plug it under, that it's okay to be wrong as long as you're learning from it, right? And then that intense focus, I try and teach people about focusing on the controllables. What do you have control over, right? I have control over my attitude. I have control over my work ethic. So I have control over how am I approaching this today, right? Am I reminding myself of that why? Am I bringing the purpose back in front of myself? I have control over that. And so, those things were hitting home to me as you were talking about it. And that kind of goes under that, I would say, commitment almost, right? I'm making these commitments to these things, or the consistency. I'm doing this day in and day out, building that small win, right? Of being consistent, of bringing the why, bringing the purpose, reflecting on my purpose, reflecting on my day, and bringing it back. Did I do the right thing today?
Yeah.
Did I focus on the purpose enough?
Yeah.
Was there an opportunity?
Yeah, even when it's hard too, because that's, the way I write about it in the book too is purpose is great and it's everything to get started on this journey. But with commitment was second. Again, I didn't make this up. This was from the research because it actually keeps us moving on the path even when it gets difficult, because it's easy to choose purpose when it's easy. When things are going well, there's, that's when it's easy. It's when things get difficult that the choice to do it is the hardest. And the way I write about commitment is to choose and then keep choosing, even when it's difficult, even when we have every reason not to, all the other reasons point to other things to blame or things out of our control. We always have the choice to choose to stay committed to the things that we believe in. That's when I think our character is really built. And when purpose starts to become a reality, it's no longer just, oh, that sounds like a nice thing we should do. It's when things are tough that we make those decisions to choose that and keep choosing it. That's the power. And I think that's really hard for organizations oftentimes because things get hard, dynamics change, the market changes, what have you. Everybody's doing this is trending. It gets really difficult to make the right decision and stay committed to purpose because it's hard. But when we stay committed to purpose and we choose it even on the hard days, I think that's when when magic starts to happen.
Well, and you see when the profit motive outweighs your purpose motive, right? That's where you see things start to go really bad. And you look at the examples of like Enron or there's been a few others out there where they're,
I gotta say that again. So good. Profit motive outweighs the purpose motive. So good. Yeah.
So that's where, for me, I tried to recognize that for myself is I don't ever want like the hitting a number or hitting a, target to be more valuable than why we're doing this. And so I've told people, if they're not meant to be a student here, that's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not meant to be a student. That's okay. We're going to find those people who are meant to go to school with us.
Yeah.
And that's our focus.
Well, I got a couple concluding questions here because this time's gone by fast, Brian.
It has. It's a good conversation.
Yeah. the final question is one I told you about pre-recording, but this one just popped in my mind. What's your purpose? What's your why that drives you, when you're feeling motivated, but pulls you when you're not? I mean, what is that for you?
Yeah, that's the pulling when you're not is probably, most people don't realize that's even more powerful a lot of times than the why, to kind of get you excited and drives you. It's the why that pulls you, right? To me, has always been more impactful in my life. And I
Yeah.
think, I started in the industry at the very bottom and really learned a lot about the whole process of how we work with helping students and the process behind the scenes. And just what kind of pulls me along was that understanding of, I've struggled in my life and I never want to be there.
Mm.
Right. And so that pulls me. There's that push of you
Wow.
got to do this. Right. And I'm going to be successful no matter what. I'm a little bit of a competitive person. So, got to be number one. Got to be
Yeah.
able to be successful. The why that's kind of the motivator, the one that gets me excited is I love helping people. I really do. And if it's through teaching young leaders and training them to things that I've learned through my life, life lessons that have been passed by mentors to me or passed on through just learning the hard way where I've fallen on my face, teaching them all those moments is exciting. It's just something that I'm able to really pour into somebody else. And, I value that I've had that for myself. I feel fortunate that somebody's done that for me.
Yeah.
And so I need to pass that on. And so those are my whys of why I get up every day and do this. And if it wasn't this, it would be something probably medical field like you were doing. I loved working in the medical field. Again, I was helping people. It's not. The funny thing is that I read the book by Tony Hsieh, Zappos, and he talked about the goal of their company was to deliver happiness.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's something I could get excited about, but it was shoes. Like, if I could get excited about shoes, there's no reason I shouldn't be excited about education or, healthcare. Those are two fields where you're really impacting people's lives.
Yeah. I think it was Frankel that said, a man that has a strong why can figure out any how. And what I heard when you shared those two, thank you, by the way, is I agree with you. I feel like the purpose and our why that pulls us is more valuable because the times in life where we need to be pulled are some of the hardest times. And usually I've found, I'm not going to say this is for everybody, but usually I've found that those whys and that purpose that pulls us, it comes from suffering we've faced in the past, and we found meaning in it. We found meaning in the hard, in the hard times, in the hardship, and that's the meaning that becomes invaluable to us, that pulls us when things get really difficult. And no one can take that from us. No one can strip us from learning how to suffer well and learning how to find meaning when it's hard, and it just compounds. The more we do it, it compounds. Versus if all we do is try to forget the hard things in life and suppress them and resent them and be bitter about them, we miss this opportunity to actually pull such powerful pull meaning from them that we know we're going to need again. And I think that's just different than the sort of aspirational type of motivating why that drives us. Those are things that we're typically passionate about. But man, on hard days, it's hard to feel passionate about those things. So
Right.
it's the pull why that gets us through. And I just love that the way you worded that. So last question is, kind of finishing this statement and it's, what really helps us move beneath the transaction? And I'm going to give another scope to this in life and leadership that kind of bridges our lives. And if we can focus on this one thing, it's at least going to put us on this journey of breaking through all the noise and really focus beneath the transaction. What is that thing that you found in your own words in your life?
I would start by saying, for the listener, why did you pick up this podcast? Why did you start listening to it? You start with your why. Why am I reading this book? Why am I, looking into this TED Talk? Why am I, watching this YouTube video? I think if you're asking that question, that will help you find what you need to gain out of the content that you're reviewing and that you're receiving. I was fortunate enough early in my career to where I was flying out from San Diego to Iowa every other week because I had a team in Iowa. We didn't have Zoom back then. That's how old I am. So people will make fun of us later. But, I was on a plane. And with that, we didn't have the cool technology where you could watch on your phone, and be distracted. So I brought a book with me. And so every flight
I was era? Is this pager era?
Yeah, not quite. It was in cell phone, but I was able to get a book finished every flight. And because of that, my growth trajectory was through the roof. I was able to really learn so much about leadership and how to really approach individuals that my growth trajectory just took off. And I was very, like I said, fortunate. That
Yeah.
experience meant a lot to me. And so, one of the things I went into it with is I want to be better at this. This
Right.
is something that I wanted to be better at. And being the competitive person, the reason I wanted to be better was because there was people who had promoted up faster than me and it drove me nuts. I'm like, no, I'm better than that, right? I'm competitive. And so, it was that thing that just drove me to continue to get better. And that was my why.
Yeah.
And so I read, I highlighted, and I made sure that I had these takeaways that would make a tremendous impact to myself and my career. And it really did. So, it's going back to your why. Why am I picking this up? Why am I doing that? And, the more you think about that, the more likely it is you're going to be able to get that content out of it.
Yeah. Love that. I think if I was a listener and I'm listening to this conversation, I feel as though one of the key takeaways would be to ask ourselves better questions. And we can ask the wrong questions of ourselves for sure. And usually those wrong questions are full of blame and full of resentment and pawning off responsibility onto others. If you were back in when you were making those flights and, you wanted to continue to level up and grow, the wrong sort of questions would be you just pointing blame at everybody else around you. But you were thinking, what do I need to do to improve here? And why do I need to improve? And the best first questions to ask typically result in us moving to action in some positive way in our life. And so if I was listening, I would definitely take away, from the silly video that we watched of the power of asking why and digging deeper.
Yeah.
To what you just said about being self-aware enough to ask ourselves good and the right questions, I think is really helpful. And even how you took the example I gave of my teacher, Miss Coletti, erasing that part of my piece of feedback, and failure oftentimes is feedback for us. And to take advantage of those moments again and start asking our questions like, why did I not get this the first time? And what am I missing here? So to wrap this in a bow, it's to live with purpose is asking ourselves why first. It's asking ourselves the right questions and digging deep enough to understand what we really care about, why we really care about it. And it's up to our own sense of morals to determine if our answers to those questions are the right answers or not. Because if I come to the end of this and say, well, I'm the most important person and all I want to do is have these amazing things happen just for me, then my morals would tell me, Chris, that's pretty selfish. I need to be thinking more about others and my impact, not just what I want. And so, but I'll leave that up to the listener to make those decisions on their own of what's your moral standard at the end of the tunnel when you ask these questions. But I really appreciate your time today, Brian. This was fun. It went by so fast. I could keep talking to you for another hour. I appreciate your time and what you've offered today and the insight you've shared and the wisdom and your experience. I've greatly appreciated it.
Well, I really appreciated you taking the time with me as well. So salamat, Chris.
Yes.
I want to thank you again. It really enjoyed it, and I appreciate what you're doing for other people. I think, people need these types of different ways of learning and gaining knowledge around leadership. It was available to me, and, I'm glad to be able to make it available to others. So really appreciate you.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody else, for tuning in to another episode of Beneath the Transaction. Keep a lookout. The book's coming out soon, and we have a docket of great episodes always in front of us. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Until then, take care.